What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about review scores, okay? It's something that obviously we bring up quite a bit, and I look at what the critics say, right? And we go over that, and I always kind of have the same theme to how I talk about review scores. Well, I want to go a little bit more in depth, and I really want to look at the recent examples with, say, Dragon's Dogma 2, and specifically, though, Rise of the Ronin. Now, I'm recording this before I've played these games. By the time you see this video, I'll probably have been playing it. So I'll have my own opinion, right? I'll form my own opinion. But right now, it's, looking at the 76 for Rise of the Ronin and seeing the reception online. And I even did a tweet about this. We need to stop with this 7.5 out of 10 business being a terrible game. Now, there's a lot more in depth there that I want to kind of expand upon in this video, but what I've seen for Rise of the Ronin, regardless if it does suck or if it is amazing, right? Like, again, because it's before I'm playing it, I don't really know. But regardless of, like, the end product, we really need to get out of our heads seeing a game that gets even a 7, even a 6.5, and saying that game must be a piece of garbage, right? A lot of comparisons were made to Days Gone when Rise of the Ronin came out, where Days Gone, classically got pretty low. I think it got like a 71, 72, somewhere around there on Metacritic. It got plenty of 6s. It got 5s when it came out. Now, I'm a Days Gone defender, but I'm not going to say like it's the greatest game of all time. I'm not a massive defender. I think it's a really solid game that you can tell had more. It could have gone in better places, bigger places for a sequel, but it was a rock solid game. I don't think it deserved 6s and 5s, okay? Now, that's a problem with me with just scores in general, but we'll get there. But what we've seen with Rise of the Ronin is, it got a 7. Oh, it got an 8. Nope, not worth my time. And I don't understand that. I get the idea that some people don't have the most time to, say, go online and go through all these different websites or all these different articles and read the minute details of a game, or watch all these YouTube videos of all these different people. I get that. I mean, people are busy. People have their own lives. These people need to go on and see just a condensed thing and say, okay, this game is an 8, right? Like, and now, okay, now I agree with that part up to there, right? People are busy. Not everybody can be terminally online. In fact, it's a good thing that they're not. But when they see that score, I think the mindset there has to shift, right? And that's a problem I have with reviews. I've long said, what is the difference? And you tell me, what is the difference between an 8.1 and an 8.2? And you shouldn't be able to tell me. I feel pretty confident that somebody can't tell me the difference between 8.1 and 8.2, because there really is none. Now, IGN, we've talked about this historically, right? They used to do that, 8.1, 7.9. Then they went to like a 0.5 scale, 8, 8.5, 9, 7.5. And they felt pretty good about that in the beginning, and that backfired. People really hated that system, and then they reverted back. So there's never really been a great system in like the classic, the dinosaur game journalist movement. There's never really been the greatest system, because to me, you can't explain, well, an 8.1, 8.2, what makes them different. But if you give 8.5 or 9, that is a big jump, because maybe it does kind of find itself in the middle there. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. So one of the first things I did when this happened is I said, okay, I often talk about like Life is Strange, right? In fact, I talk about Kingdom Hearts is kind of on my mind. So I looked up Kingdom Hearts 2, right? A classic game, childhood game, but also I think just an amazing, incredible video game. Kingdom Hearts 2 is an 87, right? I look up Life is Strange. I'm always talking about how much I love Life is Strange. 85, 8.5. I actually thought it was lower than that, but 8.5. I looked up Kena Bridge of Spirits, which the more I think about it, and the more I think about the last, say, 5 years in games, not saying it's the greatest game of all time, but when I think about the last 5 years in games that are just kind of always in my head, whether it's the visual style or the gameplay or the story or the music, Kena comes up a lot. Like, it really is actually one of my favorite games in the last 5 years. 8.1. 8.1. I've looked up What Remains of Edith Finch and The Unfinished Swan, which is one of my favorites. I think Unfinished Swan was also like an 8, or maybe even like a 7.9. My point is, right, this actually kind of helped me, because this is what I would probably suggest a lot of people do. Yes, games get good scores. Games get great scores. And we just had, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth get in the 9s. And Alan Wake 2, my game of the year last year, right? That game got, I believe, in the 9s or maybe high 8s on Metacritic. Yes, sometimes your favorite games of all time are going to get really high scores, but sometimes you're going to find those diamonds in the rough. Sometimes games are going to stand out to you a little bit more than, other people. The Days Gone situation is a pretty good one, right? Well, I mean, what would I give it? I don't, like, somewhere in the 8s, right? I don't really know where, but somebody might say, hey, that's an amazing, amazing game. Well, does it deserve a 7? Well, no. And I think that's up to like the person, you know what I mean? My point is, I think we need to stop being so reliant on, you see the yellow 77 on Metacritic and you say, man, that's not worth my time. I get it I was thinking about this, right? Like, what's a comeback you could say to me? And I think there is one. Okay, well, we only have so much money and there's so many games. See, back in the day, maybe there's 3, 4, 5 games a month. Now there could be 10 games a month. Now, I mean, slightly exaggerating, but there's more games that release now than ever before. And there's less, you could say the economy is not doing as well as it's done in the past. So, okay, you have less money potentially, and there's more games, so you have to make a decision. So I would say, you could say, well, Alex, if a game gets a 7.5, it could be a mixed kind of game. Like, I need guarantees with my money. And I would respect that. I actually very, very much respect that. I would go back to my point of like some of my class, and these are just quick games that I just thought at the top of my head. I could look up like Infamous and different things too, but just some quick games that I've been thinking about that pop up in my head occasionally. What were the scores that they get? And I did get ranges like Kingdom Hearts 2, 87. Okay, you see that. You see a Metacritic score of 87. A lot of people I think are maybe sold just because of that. Even 85 with Life is Strange. But you know what? An 81 with Kena, that is a little bit more mixed, and I freaking love Kena Bridge of Spirits. So I would really rest, I think, on that, where sometimes opinions are just different, and sometimes you might find more value in something than somebody else. Now, again, I've long blasted the review scores themselves where maybe people put too much on, certain elements. That's why when I do reviews, right, I just talk. And I mean, look, it's not the perfect system, and I end up ranting. I end up kind of going all over the place. It's sometimes hard to follow, maybe even like this video is, right? But my point when I do reviews is I just want to talk about the game, what I liked, what I didn't like, and anywhere in between. And if you find yourself agreeing with me, then maybe you like the game or maybe you dislike the game based off what I'm saying. I'm not there to say, okay, the visuals are a 7.2 out of 10. The combat, 8.15 out of 10. That's not what I'm there for. You know what I mean? And I find that to be more productive. Now, again, that's just me. Some people, like I said, some people say, well, okay, I just want to see, did Alex give the game 8.5 or a 9 or a 9.2? And then when I don't give scores, maybe they're disappointed. I get that to an extent. And again, I understand kind of the path leading up to why you want to score. But when you get to the score, I don't know. I think it's debatable of how much value you put into it, right? It goes back to what I always say when we look at the scores of all these games, when Rise of the Ronin comes out, Dragon's Dogma comes out, what I always say, and I'm going to continue to do it just, for new viewers, if they're ever there, I say, okay, I look more at what's being said than what the score is. If IGN gives a game a 8.5, I want to see not that I really care what IGN thinks, but they're a big site and people do care what they think. Okay, what did they say? What literally is going on in the game? Because oftentimes, as people have actually made fun of these sites for, oftentimes what they say might not even be reflective in the score. I mean, I remember thinking that in my head growing up reading IGN. IGN was the site for me, being in my teenage years, getting into this stuff. That's what I did. And I remember picking it out where it's like, okay, all these positives, you're saying some really good things. Oh, I maybe relate to the way you talk about a certain mechanic or feature in a game. Oh, you gave it a 7.8. I thought you would have given it a higher score based off what you said. And I think that actually happens quite a bit. And I think a lot of people see that, right? So when you see a site give Rise of the Ronin an 8, you read it, and you might say, you know what? I like it. Like the things that they're saying positively about it, I really like that. I'm going to go get it. And then, let's just put that part aside for now. You say, okay, I'm agreeing with what they're saying about the positives. And then they give the game an 8. And you might say, man, the way you talked about it, those positives to me outweigh the negatives. I would have maybe given the game a 9 based off what you wrote. Then, you gave it an 8. And I think that happens a lot. It's why reviews are very tricky. I don't envy these people. I mean, these people don't really make those decisions. The workers at IGN, they have their rubric. I remember listening to the podcast they did of how they come to scores and kind of like a peer review as well. They go through stuff. I get that, but so I don't envy them for sure. And they're kind of trapped in that situation. I think they probably do the best that they can generally, but that's my opinion on it, guys. I get it. I understand why people want the scores. You don't have a lot of time. The score is not always going to reflect what is said about it. I think the mediocre kind of mindset that people have really needs to go. Look, if you see a game gets like a 4 out of 10, you go on Metacritic and you see Gollum, right? Gollum, Saints Row, Redfall, these kind of games. And they're in the 30s, 40s, 50s, right? Okay, I think if everybody is saying universally terrible things, now maybe there is still some good that you can find, and that's fine. Some people actually like Saints Row. Now, I don't agree with that. I hated it. But, I mean, some people could. Again, that's the individual thing. That's your own opinion is what matters most kind of thing. But, okay, I would buy that. I mean, if you see a score and you see Gollum is like a 30, okay, it's probably pretty bad. But once you get into the more like ambiguous, you know what I mean? Once you even get into the sixes, it really becomes a little bit more messy where it's like, here's another thing, just to kind of end this. Different scores mean different things to different sites. And I mean, that's kind of confusing. What I mean by this, and I think even like Angry Joe does this, 5 is average for him, right? And 5 is average for some of these sites. But here's the thing. 5 is not average to even myself. When I think of I got to be honest. When I think of a 5, when I see a game that say gets a literal 50 out of 100 on Metacritic, that is not an average game. That would be considered a pretty bad game, right? Maybe not terrible, but pretty darn bad, not worth it. Now, if you see like a 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10, those would be more terrible. But the thing is, that varies, and that's even my own mindset being in this as much as I am online. Even I do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that, again, that kind of makes the point for when you see a 7, you really got to stop and think about that 7 for a second, right? Because if 5 is average on a certain site, 7 would be good. 7 would be like literally a good game. Because if 5 is average, maybe 6 is above average. Well, 7, now you have to start getting into it's a good game, it's a great game, it's an amazing game. I'm not saying all for 7, but as you go up. So you have to think about that. If you see a game that gets a 5, I suppose, you look at a game that gets a 5. If 5 is average to that site, 5 is average. And you have to kind of change your way of maybe thinking about that review in that moment. Again, it's hard. I definitely agree it's hard. I think it's harder for games that are like 3, 4, 5, 6. Even a 6, you look at a 6 and you say, yeah, that's pretty bad. Even I do that. Again, though, 6 out of 10, if we're literally going by 5 being average, 6 out of 10 wouldn't actually be all that bad. But it kind of is. It kind of is, to be fair. 7 is, I think, the messiest area, right? 7, 7.5, even 8. Because 8 should be like this amazing game, but people want 9s, right? People want, okay, I want this game to get an 88 out of 100. I want this game to get a 90, 91, 92. If it gets an 8.1, it's like, ooh, an 8.1. So it's a good game, but it's nothing special. And it's like, well, that's maybe not true. I just gave Kane a Bridge of Spirits, right? That's not true all the time. Maybe it is for some, but maybe it isn't for others. And it's messy. It's definitely messy. Okay, so I've ranted long enough. I'll let you go now. I mean, you could click off anytime you want, but let me know your thoughts. I like doing these kind of videos, and I thought this was a lot of fun. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon, all that jazz, and I hope to see you all on the next one.